I know that you've had an opportunity to work with, like, someone like an Ed Coan. Like Ed Coan is considered the greatest powerlifter of all time, and most likely he always will be. Um, what was special about Ed Coan's just body in general that allowed him, in all the years of you seeing people lift and perform at such a high level, what made Ed unique and was able to handle the type of weights that he was able to do and the type of training that he was able to handle over the years?
What makes Ed, it's just so multifactorial. If you're the best in the world, you're very special. And that specialty, whatever it is probably not unidimensional. So, of course, we can talk about Ed's body type with, his massive hands and the length of his hands and his arms. You can read his T-shirt logo and you'll get what I'm talking about. But, this is the thing of an event like powerlifting. What gives you great advantage on the pull, which, he was just light years beyond everybody else, could also be considered a disadvantage for the bench, as you know. So what made him so great? Well, certainly on the pull, he had the fabulous lever lengths, shorter femurs, longer arms. That's means you don't have to pull as far. But the other things about Ed is we can talk about this, and I don't know if now is the time, but very high level discussions on things like densifying neural drive. It gets to the very core of what strength is and what I measure in the great ones. Do you want to have that?
Absolutely, yeah. People are probably dying to hear more about that.
Right. So it doesn't matter, I can tell stories about Bill Kazmaier, Alexiev, the great Russian super heavyweight Olympian, Ed Coan, Brian Carroll, Andy Bolton, I can just, Blaine Sumner. Strength starts with a thought. The brain organizes those thoughts into nerve impulse trains. Those have to be dense. Now, when I used to arm wrestle and that kind of thing, the first thing I would do is play the psychological game to get the opponent to smile. And right away, I knew I could break their density of neural drive. So where I'm headed with the first part of the story is every one of those men, and some of the great women as well who've been on your show, all have a very dark place to go. In order to densify neural drive, it's well documented that, say, a mom might be, they'll see her child under a car pinned, and it's well documented. Mom goes and picks up the front end of that car. She avulses her bicep, she burst fractures the vertebra, but damn, she lifted the car. Somewhere in her ability was that densification of neural drive. It's different than fight or flight response, though. You have to be on the verge of the ability to commit murder. It's a full self-sacrifice, and your body is full of inhibitors. You have to inhibit the inhibitors. And when you get to that very, very dark place in your brain, you can now inhibit the inhibitors, and we measure that densification. So that's the beginning of it. I can think of some great Olympians on the platform. They've, say they're doing a clean and jerk, to move away from powerlifting to Olympic lifting for a minute. And I think of this one star. He already owned 3 world records. He had the next one It was a clean and jerk. He did the clean and he knew he had the next world record, and he allowed himself a little bit of an internal smile, if you know what I mean. He lost his density, and of course he lost the lift and the record. So my point is that game face, which people can relate to, but it's much more than that very dark place to go. And I'm sure both of you know what I'm talking about. Most people, most power lifters do not. And that's why they're not Ed Coan. That's why they're not Kaz or Brian Carroll or anyone else. The next part of the story is to convert that density of thought and the inhibition of all of the inhibitors to get the nerves to then carry the signal. So the nerves are the highway. Have they been trained to carry the densest possible volley of pulses? So that comes from basically grinding training. So get under the load, grind it out. So, if you're in a bench press situation, I love the bench for teaching density of neural drive to the neural hardware. You're getting to the sticking point, you're transitioning off the pec, moving on to the tricep and whatnot. You're pulling the bar, bending the bar, compressing the bar in a mindful way to densify and don't lose that thought, and then keep burning the nerves to carry as much electricity as they possibly can. You can start the whole thing with the neural charge and the pulse, to use a Russian technique, for example. And then, of course, all of the muscular training at the other end. So tricks like more hand grip all help to focus and take away the leakage of the neural drive.
You mentioned,
can I something else just came in my brain. Can I add one more thought
Absolutely.
to this densification of neural drive? There's some folks on the internet, and they have a little go at me every now and then, and I think, I don't know any of them who've worked with a world-class athlete or brought one from a very dark injury time in their life and brought them back onto the platform, but they still say, "Oh, this stability stuff doesn't matter." And I said, "Really? if you put a spine under half a ton of load, and if this wonky stack of oranges isn't stabilized, you're in big trouble." But anyway, what happens when a strength athlete damages a joint? You might not be able to see it on an MRI, or you might. But here's what happens. When you damage a knee ligament, the knee is now a little bit lax. It's lost its controlling stiffness. Everybody seems to understand that, but they don't get it with spines for some reason. So consider this joint as normal, and the L3, and L5S1 is normal, but this one has lost a little bit of stiffness. There's a little end plate fracture in there, which I can show you a minute if you wish. But now watch what happens. I'm going to apply a torque from above. Do you see how the majority of the movement is taking place at the joint that's lost its stiffness? So that micro movement is an instability. But here is why it's the kiss of death to a strength athlete. And one of the best demonstrations I have is you go back to World's Strongest Man. I believe was it 2018 that was in Mogadishu in Africa?
Yeah, that sounds accurate, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 2018. And all the lads got under this. It was a jig, and the load on the shoulders was somewhere around 750 pounds, and they had to squat for reps, hitting the weight on an anvil for reps. Whoever squatted 750 for the highest reps won. But it was a magnificent demonstration of how a little bit of instability shuts you down. It's a kiss of death for densifying neural drive. So go back and watch that on YouTube, and don't watch the rep that each competitor failed on. Watch the rep before failure, and you will see it. every single time with your eye. You'll see the athlete. If I can just move this down, can you still see me if I'm back here?
Sir. We got you.
Yeah. So you'll see the guys under the jig, and they're squatting away to depth, and then on the one before they fail, you'll see the hips just slide out a little bit, or you'll just see a little buckle, or you'll see the line of drive from the bar just off 2 millimeters. And at that point, they'll get that lift, but they will not get the next one because it's now shut down. The fuse box has been invoked. So the last part of that densification of neural drive is, find your footwear that roots you to the ground. Manage this line of drive and the external stability, but also the internal stability. And my world is the spine, obviously. But you've got to manage out that history legacy of injury in that athlete. Know what it is, and know what is sufficient stiffness to arrest it and allow the full expression of neural drive to take place. Anyway, I have talked way too much, and I want to hear from you guys.
No, that was
there's a little start on.
No, that was absolutely beautifully said. Yeah. Manage the line of drive. You're trying to manage it, and you can't. What we share on this show all the time is it's very difficult to manage it at 100%. So let's reduce the loads the way Ed Coan used to do. After every competition, he would bring the weights down. He would do the lifts correctly every single time. And it was very, very rare to ever see Ed Coan demonstrate poor form. He might have he might be offline a little bit, as you kind of worded it. He might be offline a little bit when it was in competition and it was, his last deadlift or something like that. But he stuck to the weights that he could manage. And I loved your explanation of how strength can, going for those big numbers can sometimes hurt us when we go past our capacity or when we're brushing up against that capacity. Do you think some of these athletes are able to kind of brush up against managing this neural drive maybe a little bit more so in their training than the next person, and maybe it's due to just the way that they're practicing it versus somebody who just kind of runs into a roadblock all the time?
Very wise. You're absolutely correct. So to get back to Ed, one of Ed's mantras was, don't fail. Every time you fail, you pollute the engram, or the muscle memory of that perfect lift. So when you talk to Ed, say, how many times in your life have you achieved the perfect lift? Well, you say that to a kid. When I was lecturing at the university, I'd say, does everyone know how to bench press? Oh, yeah. They'd put up their hand, and I'd just think, oh, like hell. They haven't a clue how to bench press. They haven't a clue. And, and then I would say, but here's the greatest lifter of all time. And he will tell you he still hasn't pulled out that perfect lift from his body yet.